Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's check it out.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's hard. It's definitely hard, right? Because I can't see you, and it's like I don't know the extent of that. But I mean, I think at this moment, I think I'm fine with it. Like you haven't shown me anything that is like crazy or too extreme.
I will say it's starting to get on my nerves a little bit that he is seemingly put off by what she was saying, because to me, there's nothing about what she said that is any different than what she was saying before. If anything, it's just further self-awareness, right? It's scary, but dissociation is not something that typically would ruin a marriage or even trigger a partner. It's not uncommon for someone to dissociate in the way that I think she dissociates, which is a very common dissociation. It's not uncommon for me to treat individuals or couples with an individual who dissociates, and for the partner to, upon discovery of dissociation, for them to say, oh yeah, I can see that, but not to say, no wonder our marriage sucks. Like, they wouldn't say that. In fact, most partners, if they did notice it, would understand it. Like if it's an individual who's been sexually traumatized, and while engaging in sex, the traumatized individual dissociates, seems to distance themselves, the partner would understand. It's like, well, I get that. Well, not all the time, of course, but I'm just giving that as a for instance. Most of the time, just off the top of my head, partners either would never notice, or they would think, well, you know, sometimes my partner just gets quiet sometimes, or just gets a little spacey or something. You know, it's not typically experienced as an affront or an attack or even an abandonment, really. So I'm a little irritated, I just have to admit, that he seems to be assuming, which I don't even think he understands what she's saying, because he's not saying language that indicates that he knows which would be normal. There are a lot of clinicians that don't understand dissociation, which is upsetting. But not only I don't think he understands what she's saying, and two, that he's assuming that it's somehow a threat. I think this is his preoccupied attachment, though.
Or anything. So I think like the only thing I can do at this point is trust, and just like trust your word and what you're saying. And like if you show me something different than that, then I can like not trust you, right? But I think I should start with trust.
Yeah, I would, if I were there, I would say, Alex, what scenario are you hearing that you're facing? What are you worried about? What's the prediction here? Based on what he's saying, well, okay, it's not irrational for someone in his position without knowing dissociation to interpret it this way, that what she was saying, he would think would literally be a threat of abandonment, right? What she's talking about with dissociation is, whether she knows it or not, is when she's triggered regarding extremely horrific trauma that she went through when she was a very young child and throughout her life. Well, she's associating it. Well, okay, so I don't get a chance to talk about dissociation, but generally speaking, it's hard to know because we can't run experiments on humans, obviously. But it seems pretty clear that if someone as an adult or even a 17-year-old has dissociative mechanisms, they developed it when they were 0 to 4. Or somewhere around there, that you can't not have developed even a little bit of dissociation as a young child. You can't, if you didn't develop that tendency when you were very young, then you won't develop it later in life. You will, upon being heavily traumatized later in life, if that's what's happening, you'll have other reactions to it, but there won't be a dissociative reaction, because the way that I see it is that we either evolved parallel mechanisms, or even this one, that is an adaptable change to the brain that helps, if needed, for the plasticity and the developmental stage of children. And so if the environment calls for that need to dissociate to survive, then in all likelihood, the child will experience that environment early in life. And so they are open to developing that early in life. But once, if they can get through the first 5 or 10 years of their life without needing dissociation, then the brain evolved to shut down that capability because, in all likelihood, it doesn't need it. That's a way of putting it into an anthropological sense, like there's some sort of knowing designer of one's development. I hope you get my point. And there's no way to know what I said is anything close to the truth. In fact, I have a much more complicated way of considering it, but that's just one way. Anyway, so she's saying that she went through something difficult when she was 17, and that is common for people because what will happen is they will develop a dissociative process, 0 to 4. Later in life, they either won't remember what they went through early in life because it was just too young, they were too young, or they're trying to forget it and they are dissociative about those memories, or they get triggered with PTSD if they even go in that direction, so they just avoid, so they have a hard time remembering what they went through. So they don't remember what they went through trauma-wise, and they don't remember dissociating when they were young. But then they notice, and then later on in life when you're 27, you think back to like the first time you remember dissociating, and you think, oh, there was that really difficult time when I was 17 where I was going through all that stress and I dissociated a lot. In fact, I almost dissociated for like a full 6 months straight, which wouldn't be normal. Typically it's like up and down, you know. But it would be common for people to conclude, oh, that must be the first time I dissociated. But in reality, it had been happening throughout their life. They just weren't aware it was happening and or were avoiding any of the memories associated with it, including the dissociation. Does that make sense?
You're funny sometimes.
Yeah. I think we all have our different issues. I think is where I'll leave that.
Obviously, there's probably people who have been through a lot less than me. And if that's what you're looking for, like, that's totally understandable. But I also think it's those things that made...
Okay, so I think she is passively but pretty clearly communicating, hey, I'm getting a vibe like maybe I'm too much for you or I have too many issues. Is that what I'm hearing? She's doing it in her slightly avoidant way, but a more avoidant way would be to say nothing and then just run, right? So she's signaling, and I think he'll receive it and will reassure, hopefully.
Me, and I think that's why we were able to connect in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Your natural inclination seems to be very fearful.
I was thinking that she was picking up on it. Earlier, she said, "You're funny." And I was hoping that what she was referring to is, oh, it's kind of cute how fearful you get when I'm just talking about something that isn't a threat to you, and you, because he's already disclosing, he's already been through these moments, that she's like, oh, you're getting afraid again. And then eventually gets to this statement, I think your natural inclination seems to be very fearful. So this is on par. It's very good communication comparatively. More constructive, more safe way to say, because what's happening on the inside is she feels in all likelihood afraid and hurt about what's happening right now, which would be normal. I would assume that's happening actually. And she's wondering why that's happening. And she's like, well, he is being distant. He seems to be rejecting me because I have these normal things. And I don't think he understands what dissociation is. And then what's the thought beyond that? Well, the thought is that he's judging me unfairly and jumping to a conclusion, and he's overreacting to something. And then from there, it's a statement of your natural inclination seems to be very fearful. Okay, so if we go backwards, a safer thing to say is, in this moment, I feel like you're pulling away from me. I don't know if that's true. And I think you're pulling away from me because you think that I have too many issues, but I don't know. I don't even know if you're pulling away from me. I certainly don't know why if you are pulling away, why that would be happening. But I just want to let you know that I'm sad. And if you want to talk about it, we could talk about it. That's starting from the beginning. Whereas to say this could, but I don't think it will, but it does risk confrontation because she's accusing him of something. It's accurate, I think, but it's more risky because he could say, "What do you mean, my natural inclination? I'm not afraid." Or, "What are you talking about? I have reasons to be concerned," or whatever. You know. Whereas if she started with her feelings, there would be no debate. There would be no argument. Plus, it conveys vulnerability and care, which would provoke empathy. That's always the thing to think of, and it's hard I'm yammering a lot, so I won't go into it. But you always want to think about what would provoke the other person's empathy when you're in a conversation like this. Not how can I convince them that their thinking is wrong? And that's what this statement is. She's not being forceful of it. And again, she's probably right. And there are worse things that she could be saying for sure. But your natural inclination seems to be very fearful is a statement of, I think you're afraid right now, and I don't think you should be. I think she's right, but it runs the risk of feeling like a criticism and feeling assuming and feeling controlling or invasive or something. So to use this as a jumping off point is what we're really hoping for from our partner is care and understanding. And if we just start from the very beginning of the flowchart of, I feel like you're pulling away and I'm worried and it hurts me and I feel like maybe you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. I don't know. So I don't like that feeling. How are you feeling? That is more likely to cause him to feel like, oh, well, I don't want you to feel that way. Okay, let me relax. That sort of thing.
Like I'm thinking about a huge decision, right?
Yeah, I get it. I am too.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just a lot, and I just want to make sure that's the right decision and it's something that I can handle. And I'm completely happy helping someone with their issues, right? That is what a marriage is. Like you would help me with my issues and I would do the same. I just want to make sure it's issues that I can deal with.
So this is actually interesting. I don't think I've ever been able to talk about this nuance. And this couple is giving me that chance to talk about a lot of things I don't usually get a chance to talk about in these reaction videos. So what preoccupied people sometimes are triggered by is reciprocation of vulnerability. So for preoccupied people, they are looking for vulnerability. They're looking for reciprocity about pursuing each other, right? And about needing each other and about vulnerability together, right? That's why they're freaking out sometimes is that there's lack of vulnerability, lack of need, lack of dependency, and they're pursuing, like, where are you? And you're so avoidant and distant. But one of the things that is observed is that for undifferentiated and for people that are struggling with their attachments, they are sometimes looking for a distance, an amount of distance, and they're pursuing, but if the pursuee allows themselves to be caught, then the pursuer actually will feel uncomfortable because it's not familiar to them. They're used to this, right? And it's not ideal because they want to be closer, but to be closer means to risk vulnerability and to risk even more loss, right? And it's also just unclear what to do. It's like, wait, I caught you. Now what, And so for her, she is breaking the mold herself by being vulnerable and being emotional and disclosing and depending and not running and sticking with it, right? So she is not running away. And he is like uncomfortable with that. There's a possibility. He's like, wait, how am I supposed to help you? And she's just like, hey, it's fine. You don't need to help, which is fine for her to say. Even if there were things he could do to help, it's not her duty to somehow give that to him. You know what I mean? So the fact that she is being, he might actually be more comfortable if she were to be less vulnerable and less talking about her issues. And so, that's because he's focusing on that. It's like, oh, you have a lot of issues. Well, so do you, pal. So, and he's saying that out loud, and I trust that he'll get there. And I hope that he understands or has a way of evaluating this in the interim, sleeping on it, that he's like, oh, I think I might be triggered by knowing that you have issues actually makes me worry that you're going to leave me because of those issues, but that's not okay to do. If you have issues, then I want you to tell me about it. And I also want to feel like I want some control over it so I can control my destiny, but that doesn't make any sense because if you don't need my help with it or there's nothing I can do, then what I'm supposed to require you to give me something to do? That's stupid. I would hope that he would. I think that's where he's at. But something to think about for yourself if you are avoidant or you have an avoidant partner and you tend to be, if you're preoccupied or you're avoidant and you have a preoccupied partner, is that sometimes for the avoidant person to become more healthy isn't necessarily going to be taken very well by this person or by the system around it because it's breaking the pattern. and it's uncertain. Sometimes the devil, right? We would rather have this bad situation that we can predict than a new situation, which might be good, but might also be a complete unknown as to what happens at that point. Is everything going to fall apart at that point?
And it's hard to be sure of that in this scenario, right? That's kind of where I'm at. Like I definitely am not scared of it.
Well, thanks for clarifying that. Because, yeah, sometimes it feels like that's the case.
Yeah.
So that's me trusting you.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would imagine that if they do get engaged and meet up in person, they'll just have other things to do besides just talking about their traumas and their issues. And we'll have some fun together. In the edit, anyway, they don't have a lot of that. And I'm worried that she's going to compare her relationship with Alex, to Mason, because Madison and Mason, that's all they have is fun, right? I guess I hope that they meet up in person and can enjoy the physicality and the chemistry and the intimacy and the laughing and the activities, and they can have some variety in their interactions.
And not to toot my own horn, but out of everything life has thrown at me, I'd say I'm doing a pretty good job.
You definitely are. And I definitely love like your depth. I'm interested in you and like who you are, because you are a very unique person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's trying to remind him, or point out, maybe remind herself that. So it's very common, really, for both of these individuals. I mean, he's directly said that a part of his preoccupied anxious attachment, he feels he's not worthy, and assumes that people are going to leave him because he's not worthy, and so he is anxious and will try to get out ahead of things before abandonment happens. I'm a little worried that he actually is exhibiting a sign of things to come, that he will resort under pressure of worries of loss to engage in this kind of odd control behavior. It's not like abusive, right? Because his vibe is softer, but that codependency element, which is interesting because she has the background of someone who would develop codependency and overfunctioning, but he's starting to exhibit that. Listen to my deep dive on codependent personality disorder and overfunctioning, and I, in doing the deep dive, thought about 3 different types. There are 2 main types and like a rarer third type. I had the accommodating, I can't remember the labels, but generally speaking, there's this accommodating type, this controlling type, and then this rarer version of like a chameleon type. But the accommodating type is someone who, accommodates and picks up around the underfunctioner, fixes their life around them and softens their life so that they don't experience any consequences and puts themselves aside. There's another type, though, which is the controlling type, which is to control the underfunctioner and to keep them in a place of underfunctioning. And the underfunctioner will provoke the overfunctioner as well. But there's some signs there. I don't know if it is a tendency, and even if it is, I don't know how intense it would end up being, but it is a bit of a flag there.
I definitely appreciate it.
Thanks for saying that.
Oh, what I was getting at was that this is bothering me because even if there weren't any traumas, the way that this is panning out is he's giving the impression that she's lesser or broken or not good enough because of her natural reaction. She hasn't disclosed anything like, one of the ways I cope with my traumas is I like to rob banks or I like to lie and run up credit card bills. She's not saying anything like that. She's just talking about dissociation. I mean, she's talk about something you don't have any control over, right? And I don't know if it's purposeful. It probably isn't. And I don't even know if this is happening, but his vibe is one of, I don't know if I should marry you, right? And maybe that's a logical thing to say. I've been saying that for a while. I was just like, well, sometimes that decision can be made, and it's not immoral. The sooner the better, really, before she's too invested. But the overall vibe is one of her potentially not being a good candidate. And you could imagine her thinking, because she doesn't usually open up, right? She usually avoids and doesn't show this side of herself and runs, right? So for her to be vulnerable like this and to open herself up and to have someone like him, right? It'd be one thing if someone like Mason, and I don't want to disparage Mason at all, but he, in terms of the edit, is not the sort of person that seems particularly interested in having conversations like this. Alex does, right? By far. And so for someone like him, and he's talking about his own traumas. So for him to give a vibe like, I don't know, I feel like there's just too much liability with you, that could be particularly hurtful and demoralizing, and would buy into the notion that she's not good enough. He's talked about how but so they both have that. Yeah, it's just unfortunate.
I've never felt this way about someone. You do mean a lot to me.
I've never doubted that.
Mads, you're amazing. And I know that because you've shown me who you are as a person. This is a connection that means so much to me, and I'm not going to just throw this away. I know it's hard what we're doing.
Okay, so to catch you up, I guess I'll just say what I think is happening, which is that Mason at this point, I think in the 10-day span, they are getting to the make or break days when they have to start seriously signaling to the other person that I'm going to ask you to marry me, or I want you to ask me to marry me, or I want to marry you, or I want to get engaged. And then the engagements happen where they get a ring and they dress up and they do the whole thing. So I think they're approaching that threshold. And Mason likes Meg and Madison, and he has said that he liked both equally. But the way the dates were playing out, it just seemed like with Meg, it never really went deeper. With Meg, it's a lot of Mason and Meg talk. It kind of has a ring to it, though, Mason and Meg. The two of them talk about aliens and about how they have the same favorite movies, which is interesting, and other kinds of, I don't know if you want to call it surface. Meg is active. She is fun and very energetic. I mean, she knows the appropriate energy level, or she has a range, I suppose. But in terms of the edit, it just seems like she doesn't ever or doesn't want to slow down to do the deeper conversation that is typical when people become engaged. Mason hasn't really either. I think he's more ready to have a conversation like that, but he doesn't seem oriented that way. And he said something interesting, and I took notes on it. He said that he's always the one that gets broken up with, which is interesting. On one hand, you could interpret that as, well, he's not a good partner, and that's why people always leave him. And maybe that's true, I don't know, or it's part of it. But another possibility is that as the relationship takes a downturn, maybe even primarily caused by him, he just has a hard time pulling the ripcord and pushes other people into that role. I don't know that. There's just a lot of possibilities. Or he's just had bad luck with, the handful of people that he seriously dated. Who knows? And he said that. But what I think is happening is that in his interactions with Meg and Madison, I don't think he's solid about either one, but he feels a little bit better about Madison because there's a deeper potential there that I think he feels. That's my guess. He doesn't seem particularly super invested in anybody. The other side of the pod is with Madison, and I think for her, there are times when she's definitely wanting to be with Alex, but they've had a couple of those awkward, or I don't know, those conversations where he is pulling away because she has issues. I think both of them might even phrase it that way. So I'm not interpreting. I think both of them would say, well, when I talk about having my more severe issues, he pulls away and seemingly kind of holds it against me or considers me not to be a safe match for him or something. Also, Madison and Alex don't have the kind of playful chemistry that she has with Mason. Anyway, so I think she had definitely put Alex as number one, and then she just had a date with Alex in which they had another one of those moments, and I think she feels like maybe it's a bad idea with Alex. So she meets up with Mason, I think hoping for it to be amazing. You know, I could imagine her going into the date with Mason and thinking, I don't think things are going to work out with Mason, but things weren't really great with Alex. So maybe if things go amazingly well, then I'll reconsider. She said something that I didn't include in one of my reaction videos where she said she was just waiting for one of them to step forward and say, "You're my one." She was saying that in the lounge, so I think she might have just been saying that as a way to avoid getting into ranking, because I think at that point she was putting Alex number one. But it does raise the question as to whether or not that is her approach. And, you know, if you're thinking either one of them would be great, I don't know what to do. I wish the universe would just decide for me, or they would decide for me. There's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, so I think she went into this date and she is communicating. She has been communicating to Mason that she basically wants him to demonstrate who he's into and what, because they've been talking about how they both have two connections. And she seemed to be saying, look, if you're not going to show, because she's intimating that Alex is number one and he's a number two. She's not saying that directly, but there's signs of that. But she's also leaving hints of like, well, if you show that you're into things, then, you know, things could be good between you and me. So then he steps into that, which I don't think he's super familiar with or comfortable with, or the vibe is just not really conducive to that. And so right now he's leaning in and showing that, essentially saying that she is definitely his number one. But he's doing it in this way and in this context where it's not very, it feels like a performative thing. Not that he's faking, but that he is like, oh crap, if I don't deliver right now, I'm going to lose her or something. So he does that. And I was thinking that Madison would reciprocate with the way she was talking, but she's not. He just essentially professed his love for her. And she's like, yeah, I never doubted that, whatever. And I think that's also part of her avoidant. Another part of avoidant attachment, which seems to be represented in her behavior, is that you not only worry about being abandoned such that you just avoid relationships and emotionality altogether, but you also avoid guilt. You feel, because you often are distancing yourself, and people are often telling you, you're hurting me, you're so distant, you're always rejecting all the time. And avoidant people can have a complex around guilt around that because of, you know, just all the reasons you can imagine. And so when they are in a situation where they're about to reject someone, or they feel like someone feels rejected by them, they have a lot of resentment around that, and they'll just be like, hey, you know, like, figure your own shit out. Why are you hurt by me if I didn't give you the reason to be dependent on me? That kind of attitude. I don't know if that's what's happening, but there seems to be that kind of thing. I think if she were more at ease with the normal guilt that happens on this show where you end up rejecting someone, I think she would face this a little bit more head on and be more upfront with him. But she was kind of leading him on in a sense, and then he delivers, and then she's just like, yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it kind of has that look to it.
Just throw this away. I know it's hard what we're doing, but
Yeah, I'm not worried about like our connection. I think that was just kind of on my mind coming into this date.
well, I'm glad.
I think another possibility is that she just wants to go home, and she's thinking Mason and Alex aren't going to work. I mean, I think she has reasons to consider that, especially to think, I'm not sure if, I mean, maybe me and Alex are a good couple, but I don't know enough to say that it's a for sure thing.
I hope so. Hunger Games, baby.
I don't know. My mind is scrambled. I know.
Oh. Hunger Games, man. Dog eat dog.
Don't test me. Huh? So, dog eat dog, Hunger Games. Hunger Games. Okay, well, from the little clip, what Madison was saying was she's on the fence. Maybe that fits into what I was wondering is she had Alex as her number one, then she had kind of a interesting, concerning date with him, but not super concerning, and it sort of brought Alex back down. So then she went to Mason to see if that would work out, and that was a good news to her of like, oh, he has me as his number one, so at least I have an option there, and I do connect with Mason, so I don't know what to do now. Or if she still has Alex as her number one, because the way she was talking to Alex and the way she was talking to Mason, it was pretty clear that she was trying to appeal to Alex and had warmth with Alex. She doesn't seem to have any emotional kind of, I don't know what you say, but like romantic partner warmth with Mason. She has fun with Mason, but doesn't have the kind of lovey-dovey vibe, but who knows. And that's the end of that episode, so I will stop there. And it's late, and I just tucked in my wife. I'm pointing down because our bedroom's right below me. And I just kissed her goodnight. And I'm a night owl, so I'll be up for a while, maybe editing this episode. That's TMI, perhaps. And everyone out there, let me know what you think in the comments. I'm reading the comments. Don't spoil anything for me in the comments, or anyone else for that matter. Because some people, they don't even watch the show. They just watch my reaction videos. Not commonly, but you know. And it's not hard to warn people about spoilers or to have that way of obscuring a spoiler or have it below or something, you know. So just keep that in mind. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really, really do.